Well, I apologize because my camera is not working today, but I am here even if you can't see me. I'm Helen Lorek, and I am happy to welcome you to our sixth and final online YEPA workshop on behalf of the OECD. So I will go ahead and start us with the welcoming remarks, and then we'll be joined by the commission afterwards. So I just wanted to briefly talk about, since it's our last workshop together, all of the work that we've done over the last few years. We've built a community that has collaborated, engaged in policy dialogue, and brought people together from various backgrounds, sectors to work towards better youth entrepreneurship policy with the goal of supporting the next generation of entrepreneurs. So as many of you know and have been part of this journey for a long time, we've unpacked a lot of critical themes over the course of these YEPA workshops. We've talked about access to finance and entrepreneurial skill development, helping young people to develop entrepreneurial spirit and have motivation to see entrepreneurship as a viable career path. We've also explored innovation, young, innovative women. We've talked about green entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship. And so today we're putting that all together and we're going to talk about how to effectively design and deliver youth entrepreneurship policy. So we're very excited to hear from various policymakers from across the EU and OECD countries on how they have been approaching designing their youth entrepreneurship policy schemes. And we're also going to hear from experts that are going to talk about more about the why. Why do we need more or better youth entrepreneurship policy schemes? Why is this important to continue to invest and support young people in pursuing business creation? So we're looking forward to our discussions today. And as you might have seen on the agenda, the second half of the workshop will actually go into the YEPA legacy. So again, before we wrap up our workshop series, we want to take a time to reflect on what we've discussed, what we're hoping to leave behind as a YEPA legacy. So we're looking forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas of what you've taken away from this experience and what you hope YEPA will stand for in the future. A quick message before I pass the floor is that if you have not registered for the Youth Entrepreneurship Policy Summit, which will be held in Brussels on 6 and 7 October, please do so in the coming days. We've extended the deadline just for the end of this week. So if you haven't gotten in, please do that soon. We would love to see you in Brussels and be together again in person. So before I pass the floor to my colleagues at the European Commission for their welcoming remarks, I just want to take a moment to thank you all for your commitment and contributions over the past 2.5 years. It's been really great to work with many of you and to engage in this policy dialogue with you. So thank you again, and I will pass the floor to Baptiste.
All right. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you today. I was waiting for our director, Ruth Passerman, representing the DG Employment at the European Commission, to join us this morning. She's slightly delayed, so maybe what I'm suggesting is to switch a little bit the order of the agenda and kindly ask our host today to take the floor while our director, host Passaman, is joining. Would this work for you, Ellen?
Sure. Well, I will then be happy to introduce our host of today's workshop, which is Malta. So I'll pass the floor to Jason Zamet of the Malta Youth Agency for his welcoming remarks. Jason, are you with us? We just saw you.
Yes, Helen, I'm also having some problems with my camera. It keeps switching on and off, and I think I'll leave it like that because then it will be a little better for me. So anyway, is everybody hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, thank you for this opportunity and good morning, everyone. My name is Jason. I'm a youth worker by profession, and I work for the National Youth Agency of Malta, where as a senior manager, I coordinate or try to coordinate the national youth policy. So I want to start here with a disclaimer. When it comes to youth entrepreneurship, my expertise lies on the first word in the term. So my expertise lies in youth rather than entrepreneurship. But for the past 2.5 years, I've worked closely with especially with Malta Enterprise on this. So I think I got a little bit the hang of it as well. And what I intend to do for the next few minutes is, in a way, share a couple of lessons that I've learned from youth policy that I think can come also quite useful when designing youth entrepreneurship policies and programs. So to start with, I would like to start with an understanding that while there is no universal agreement on the definition of youth, most often, research explains it as a series of transitions. For instance, from primary school to secondary school, where it actually starts, then from schooling to employment, and so on. So these are these kinds of transitions where young people, in a way, master their own autonomy. So youth entrepreneurship obviously is a very big idea in this because it could facilitate such transitions through which young people can create their own future, generate jobs, they can shape the economy. So for us in youth policy, the notion of youth entrepreneurship makes a lot of sense, and it's one of those big ideas. But we also know that to unlock such potential, there needs to be some other things that are in place. And I think that first we need to understand that young people is, when we talk about young people, they are not this one big group, uniform category. Young people are not homogeneous. There is no single youth voice, in a way. There are so many paths that could lead to successful youth enterprise. So definitely there's no one size fits all solution. Young people might be coding in basements, other might be experimenting, I don't know, with like organic farming or something. Some would want to build social enterprises that would tackle climate change, while others would just want to do something small to earn a living and an income. So their backgrounds, their dreams, their challenges are very different. And when we design youth policies and programs, we must start from whatever allows for this diversity to flourish rather than go for uniformity. Secondly, I think another lesson from youth policy would be that ideally young people would need to be involved in designing these policies and programs. And when I say involved, it's not just that they are surveyed or consulted, but they would need to be engaged in co-creating them to build their own ownership. Because when young people help in shaping these programs, they are more likely to believe in them and stick with them. It's like it's not just about giving someone a seat around the table, but it is also about letting them help with the preparation and the cooking of the food. So it's another step. A third lesson would be that we need to about thinking about working across sectors. We need to think about the connection between youth policy and entrepreneurship policy. In the past 2.5 years, I've realized that at times we exist in very separate worlds, siloed in a way. Youth policy talks about participation, well-being, identity, while entrepreneurship policy would be talking about markets, investment, innovation. But actually, young people would need both. And the key here is that we would need to strike a balance. We cannot have youth programs that talk about business without addressing their real life challenges and realities of young people. But there again, we can't have feel good youth initiatives that don't actually help young people to access capital and markets or go for opportunities for growth. The last point, the fourth point, would be that, and this is where youth work comes in. And like I said, I'm a youth worker, so I'm biased here. But I do believe that youth work can be the translator, youth work can be the broker. Youth work understands youth culture, understands the passion of young people, understands their energy. And through youth work, we can give the skills that are essential for and essential for any entrepreneurial journey, like leadership, like creativity, like resilience, like confidence. And yes, youth work makes it fun. Because let's face it, when we're talking about young people, when we're trying to engage young people, we need to meet them with whatever is relevant, but we also need to meet them with excitement and fun. So it's not just spreadsheets and policy briefs. There needs to be fun. So, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say here, the lessons I've learned from youth policy, it would mean that we need to involve young people in meaningful policy development. We need to recognize their diversity. We need to work and to create cross-sector collaboration between youth policy and entrepreneurship policy. We need to invest in youth work as a bridge, as a broker. And obviously, we need to design systems that are smart, inclusive, and why not a little bit of fun if we really want to work with young people. That's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Many thanks, Jason. I see that our director at the DG Employment, Ruth Passerman, finally managed to join. Good morning, Ruth. Can you hear us? I think you're muted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, good morning.
Okay, good morning.
After an introduction from the OECD on our host from Malta, it's now you turn to offer to the participants some welcoming remarks.
Yes, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I missed the welcome from Jonathan, but I heard the intervention from Jason. So thank you very much for that. Well, I'm Ruth Passerman, Director at DG Employment for Funds Programming and Implementation. And I've been joining you. I mean, there are different workshops, so I don't know if I have been joining you specifically in one of the previous ones, but I think so. And I'm very happy to participate in this series of workshops. I think they're very important. Today, the theme is to effectively design and deliver youth entrepreneurship policies. As you know, the ambition that we have with these academies and this series of webinars is really to initiate policy changes which favor youth and that improve a mutual understanding between the policymakers, the experts, and the youth representatives. There are various instruments which are used in Europe to support, let's say, youth policies. For example, we have some and youth entrepreneurship in particular. We have integrated financial instruments. We have innovative training programs. We have sort of focusing on development of entrepreneurial ecosystems. So we have quite a lot of instruments which have the potential to succeed, but we remark, unfortunately, that a lot of time there are good intentions, but then there are still problems in the actual implementation, and that the effectiveness and efficiency of these policies is not as good as we would like. There are some common pitfalls. For example, there is a mismatch between the policy goal and the real world needs. There is the delivery system is fragmented. There is a lack of coordination. So, okay, all this to say that I think the lessons that the meeting today should be about learning the lessons from the various experiences that we've had so far to see how we can implement policies which are more robust and more coherent and that actually serve the purpose of youth entrepreneurship. And to do this also using, let's say, real solid evaluation methods. Of course, the success of any policy relies on various critical factors. It's always important that you have a defined set of objectives that have been identified and that have been formulated together with the stakeholders. It's also important that there is enough budget to do whatever it is that you want to do. But also, I think it's important to have a good monitoring system that allows you to see what works and what doesn't work and to adapt And that's the other part, to be able to adapt what you have been doing on the basis of the, let's say, of the monitoring and identification of what works and doesn't work. And to be able also to do that, you need to have a very good collaboration with the various stakeholders. Who are the various stakeholders for youth entrepreneurships? Well, obviously, young people, also educational institutions, the private sector, social economy actors, and the public sector as a whole, the government, let's say. And it is very difficult to actually have this effective cooperation and partnership in a way that it's really both, working both ways. And that's why I think it's quite important to develop effective working methods. Of course, developing an entrepreneurial mindset is also an issue of education. So you have to start already in primary and secondary schools, but it also has to be promoted through all kinds of curricula. And then promoting the cultural shift that values and encourages entrepreneurship is really important. Empowering young entrepreneurs with the skills, resources, and confidence that is needed to succeed, whatever their background or their circumstances, is really key. So I'm looking forward to listen today to this to the best practices of where policies have successfully integrated packages, combining that combine both financial and non-financial assistance that foster the entrepreneurial culture and that embrace innovation. The goal today is really to share this type of knowledge and to foster the collaboration and explore how these examples can be scaled within our own framework. So I apologize for being late, but I'm actually looking forward to the discussions. Just to add a little point that there will be a Youth Entrepreneurial Policy Summit in October, which will be the final event of the Youth Entrepreneurship Policy Academy, and it will be physical in Brussels. Voila. Thank you very much. And I apologize again for the delay.
Thank you very much for those welcoming remarks. It's exciting to be at this workshop and wrapping up a series where we've been able to discuss so many different topics. So we will now move to our next session, which is going to explore the case for youth entrepreneurship policy. And before we discuss the different approaches that are being taken, I'm happy to introduce Katja from Slovenia, who will be discussing the why behind youth entrepreneurship policy. So I will pass the floor to Katja.
Okay, thank you. I prepared a short presentation, 15 minutes presentation, just to share my screen. Okay. Okay. Now I will just start. So, dear colleagues, partners, and YEPA community members, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this important workshop. So my name is Katja from the Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Maribor, Slovenia, where I specialize in entrepreneurship policy and research. I am part of the Institute for Entrepreneurship and Small Business Management, where we actively contribute to the development of entrepreneurship policies by providing analytical inputs through the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, the world's largest entrepreneurship research project, as well as through our main national project called Slovenian Entrepreneurship Observatory. I also collaborate with OECD on the topic of inclusive entrepreneurship, where we address the specific challenges and opportunities for underrepresented groups, including, of course, youth. My involvement in YEPA project comes at the invitation of the Ministry of Labor, Family, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities of the Republic of Slovenia, with whom we actually share a common goal to support better evidence-based and inclusive entrepreneurship policies for youth. So it is a pleasure and honor to open today's session. I've been asked to explore the why behind youth entrepreneurship policy. That's it, why we need it, why it matters, and why youth deserve specific, well-designed support to develop their entrepreneurial potential. I will start with the central question that sets the tone for today's session. Why should supporting youth entrepreneurship be a policy priority? Okay, let's start from this question. Actually, my answer, I would personally start by saying that the answer to these questions goes far beyond economic indicators. It touches on inclusion, empowerment, innovation, and the very shape of our future labor markets and societies. Because young people are not just the future, they are active agents of change today. In a world which is shaped by constant transformation, new technologies, and pressing social challenges, youth entrepreneurship plays an important role in unlocking innovation, fostering resilience, and creating inclusive growth. Let me briefly share some data that illustrate, maybe just to minimize this, okay? Let me briefly share some data that illustrate this resilience in Slovenia. When we look at entrepreneurial activity among young people under 34, the data from Global Entrepreneurship Monitor Slovenia between 2018 and 2022 show clear phases of adaptation. While the COVID crisis initially disrupted many entrepreneurial efforts, young entrepreneurs in Slovenia responded with remarkable, let's say, flexibility and determination. The dip in 2020 reflects the immediate shock of the pandemic, but after 2021, we saw a significant increase in early stage entrepreneurial activity measured by total early stage entrepreneurial index. And this increase shows us actually that young entrepreneurs were able to adapt to post-pandemic conditions and to restart or reinvent their ventures. So this is, a strong signal that entrepreneurship among youth is not only about ambition, it is also about resilience. And it confirms this importance of having a strong support structures in place before a crisis such as pandemic hits. However, it is not easy to start. Different data sources show that across the European Union, there is actually a strong interest in entrepreneurship among youth. In fact, according to some data, around 40 to 45% of those aged 18 to 30 express a clear desire to become self-employed. But actual self-employment or business creation remains significantly lower. In 2020, only about 2 million youth aged 20 to 29 across the European Union were self-employed. And that's just 7% of all active individuals in that age group. So this is clearly lower compared to the overall self-employment rate among the working age population. Slovenia, however, follows a similar pattern with relatively low youth self-employment rate, despite relatively high levels of entrepreneurial intent. And this highlights actually a clear message that interest is not an issue. The challenge lies in the transition from motivation to realization, so turning ideas into businesses. And this is precisely where well-designed youth-oriented policies play a critical role. The gap actually between interest and actual engagement in entrepreneurship clearly points to the barriers youth face when trying to become self-employed. According to the literature, these challenges can generally be grouped into three categories: personal, systemic, and contextual barriers. And each of these barriers playing a different but interconnected role. These barriers are not new for us. Many of them have been a consistent theme also throughout our discussions in the YEPA project, so I won't go deeper into this now. But I have to mention these barriers because this is exactly where youth entrepreneurship policy steps in, not as something optional, but as a necessary intervention. For example, structural barriers won't go away on their own because the market doesn't automatically correct for unequal access to finance, for example, or lack of confidence or regulatory systems that are too rigid for young first-time entrepreneurs. And that's the role of policy. Not just to encourage, let's say, people to be entrepreneurial, but to create a supportive environment where it's actually possible to try, to grow, even to fail, and most importantly, to try again. And effective policy doesn't just focus on the individual, it focuses on building a broader entrepreneurial system in schools, through incubators, via mentors, access to finance, support services, etc. And critically, policies for youth must be tailored to young people's need. We can't simply copy-paste tools that were designed for experienced adult entrepreneurs and, let's say, expect the same outcomes also for youth entrepreneurs. When we look at the current EU support landscape, youth entrepreneurship is clearly on the agenda, not just, let's say, a side topic, but as part of a broader strategic priorities. And this chart gives us a snapshot of the availability and quality of youth entrepreneurship support across EU countries based on OECD data for 2023. It actually compares support for young entrepreneurs with that available to other population groups who may also face barriers to entrepreneurship, such as women, such as older workers, job seekers, migrants, and people with disabilities. And what we see is that some areas like entrepreneurial skills and certain forms of training or mentoring are more developed and more accessible for youth, for example. But in other areas, particularly access to finance and administrative support, gaps remain significant for young entrepreneurs and also for other vulnerable groups. So those entrepreneurs still face some structural disadvantages. I can share one example from Slovenia. For example, in Slovenia, students who register a company in their own name may, for example, lose access to key benefits such as meal subsidies, such as scholarship, housing, and so on. So rather than encouraging youth to take initiative, maybe during their studies, the system often punishes them for being, let's say, proactive. In Slovenia, youth entrepreneurship is actually embedded within a broader youth policy. However, there is no centralized institution responsible just or exclusively for youth entrepreneurship. But the responsibilities for youth entrepreneurship are spread across different ministries and local authorities. And the Office of the Republic of Slovenia for Youth plays, let's say, a coordinating role. The national priorities are set in the resolution on the National Youth Program, which outlines long-term goals and guides youth-related policy. While, let's say, this model brings some flexibility, it also requires a strong cross-sector collaboration to ensure entrepreneurship support to be integrated, to be consistent, and to be targeted, as already, I think, Jason said or pointed out at the beginning. As we saw earlier in the EU White Radar chart, the most widely available forms of support for youth across member states focus on entrepreneurship skills, especially training, coaching, mentoring. And now on this slide, we see the situation in Slovenia assessed through the OECD, European Commission Better Entrepreneurship Policy tool, where national experts rated 6 key areas of youth entrepreneurship support on a scale from 0 to 10. And we can see that again, skills come out the strongest, followed by regulations and culture, but finance, networks, and strategic alignment received a bit lower scores, about, let's say, 5. We are somewhere in the middle. So those areas can be seen or can be more targeted or more targeted effort should be needed also in Slovenia and also on other let's say member states. Based on both the Slovenian experience and let's say broader European dialogue, we come to understand what makes youth entrepreneurship policy truly effective. First, it needs to be holistic. It is not enough to fund startups. We need to combine funding with skills development, mentoring, access to markets, and so on. Second, it must be co-created. So young entrepreneurs shouldn't just be the recipients of support, they should be involved in shaping it. Then third, locally delivery, so local delivery matters. Support works best when it comes through institutions that understand the local community and the challenges young people face. Then fourth, policy must be data informed. It should be based on real evidence, regularly evaluated and adopted through feedback. Fifth, it needs to be sustainable. We need to move beyond one-off projects and build long-term strategic frameworks that evolve over time. And finally, youth entrepreneurship support must be ecosystem integrated. That means linking education, the business sector, local communities, and tailor support into a connected system that actually works for youth, for young entrepreneurs. Let me end with this. Entrepreneurship is not just a career choice, it is a form of agency. And when we support youth entrepreneurship, we are investing in a more inclusive, more resilient, and more innovative future. But to get there, we need comprehensive and inclusive entrepreneurship policies. We need partnerships between policymakers, between researchers, practitioners, and young entrepreneurs themselves. And also, we need platforms like YEPA to keep learning, to keep connecting, and to keep improving. So thank you very much for listening, and I looking forward to today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katja. It's a wonderful presentation. We have time for a few questions. So if anyone has a question for Katja on any of the points that she discussed, whether it's or even a comment or a reflection on some of the themes that she brought up in terms of the why behind youth entrepreneurship policy, or any questions on the Slovenia data and presentation that she provided, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question directly. Yes, Toby?
Yeah, thank you. Really nice presentation. Thank you. I saw networks then were very well, not very highly scored, shall we say, in Slovenian context. Is there an even approach to trying to address this lack of networks for youth entrepreneurship, or is it a wider lack of networks in general, not just youth entrepreneurship in Slovenia? And do you have an idea why this is?
Yeah, we saw that it's actually a great point. We do a lots of effort to let's say raise the network between young entrepreneurs. As a professor of entrepreneurship, I see every day how much, let's say, potential young entrepreneurs or young people have in classroom, but also how little formal exposure many of them get to entrepreneurship, let's say like that, especially in early education, as I think Ruth already mentioned. And also, according to Global Entrepreneurship Monitor data, entrepreneurship education, mostly in primary and secondary schools, remains one of the lowest rated areas of support. And maybe is this a starting point, not only in Slovenia, but I think the data also shows across Europe. The situation is better in higher levels of education, but really low scores at primary schools and secondary schools. And I think this is significant because the development of entrepreneurial competences, such as problem solving, initiative, opportunity recognitions, be able to be active, proactive, to collaborate, starts early. And without a systematic or practice-oriented approach, already in the school system, we risk limiting the pipeline of young people who are maybe both willing and able to engage in entrepreneurship later on. So there is clearly still untapped potential here in terms of integrating entrepreneurship, let's say, more systematically into formal curricula, through additional learning opportunities, even starting as early as preschool, from kindergarten, let's say, on. Maybe is this a starting point that can help later on?
Wonderful. Thank you. Are there any other questions for Katja?
If I may,
Yes.
can you hear me? Yes. Just a question on the different skill set that you need, like you were mentioning, that you need for young entrepreneurs and established entrepreneurs. So I'm sure established entrepreneurs have more of a network, but at the same time, I think small ones often are very far away on the digital skills, knowledge. I mean, they're, not at all, not at all, but yeah, I think there are some advantages also that young people have in a way, yeah, to be more in the way one could start now a business. I don't know what you think about this.
Yeah, of course, I agree. They have skills, they are really proactive. As I showed on this graph, the trends, like let's say post-COVID rebound, this shows really clearly. Of course, we can see this rebound or growth in early stage activity can be also observed across the broader population as well, not just in youth, but however, not in some extents. This is, I mean, particularly relevant here, that this trend to be, let's say, more resilient, this appears among young entrepreneurs more visible. But they are more vulnerable when it comes to market entry, when it comes to resources and risk exposure. And to observe such a strong rebound, specifically in this group, make, I think, this trend especially important. And this is, I think, partially because of their skills and also, of course, the value of targeted support for youth, maybe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Any other questions? If not, you're welcome to ask your questions in the chat. Katya will be here. She can answer as well, and we'll have more time later in our discussion groups as well to pick up anything. So we'll now move to our next session, which is a panel session. So a brief announcement that there's a change to the agenda. Unfortunately, due to unexpected events, one of our panelists, Alona, is unable to attend today. So I will now be moderating the session with Baptiste and Natalie as our panelists. So let me just spotlight you so everyone can see. There we go. So wonderful. Well, thank you very much for being with us today. So the session today is to discuss about the different approaches to designing and delivering youth entrepreneurship. So as it's already been mentioned by our various speakers, youth are not a monolith. They're quite diverse in their interests and their activities and the sectors that they want to work with, and therefore policy needs to adapt and tailor to young entrepreneurs. So to begin, I will now ask Natalie, who is a Chief Officer at Malta Enterprise, to share a bit more about how Malta is approaching youth entrepreneurship policies. And maybe we start with what are the main objectives? What are the ideas behind these policies?
So good morning to everyone, and thank you for the opportunity of having us with you today. As Malta Enterprise, just to give a brief introduction on what we do, we are the Economic Development Agency of the Government of Malta. So essentially, apart from getting new business to open up in Malta, and with our support, they are able to scale up and grow in Malta. Of course, we are also responsible to identify which policy changes we need to look into as a country. And one of them, of course, is entrepreneurship in the wider sense of the word. So in general, we're very much looking at putting into place policies which support entrepreneurship. Of course, then when it comes to youth entrepreneurship, That is very important, as we know that is something which we need to start tackling from a young age. So it is something that we need to make sure that it's being reflected in the educational sector. So even there, as Multi Enterprise, we are working with a number of stakeholders, both private and public, to ensure that there are a number of initiatives which really highlight the importance of youth entrepreneurship, what it means to be an entrepreneur even at a young age, and offer them the necessary support to be able to take kind of the next step in their journey. So again, as I have said, we work with a number of institutions. Some of them are present here today and others are not. And we're very much pushing to create the right, I would say, ecosystem or the right platform when it comes to embarking on youth entrepreneurship.
Wonderful, thank you. Let me now turn to Baptiste. On the European level, what are the main objectives behind youth entrepreneurship policies and programs today, in your opinion?
Yes, thanks a lot, Elaine. Good morning, everyone. Well, that's the European Union and the policies implemented, an initiative by the European Commission. So maybe I would say that the first objective we set is to promote youth employment and self-employment. We have many initiatives under like the current Commission. You may have heard about the youth guarantees that aim to ensure that all young people under 25 can receive a good quality offer of employment. We promote continued education, apprenticeship. We work a lot on traineeship quality, on leaving informal education, on going back to formal education, on TVET. So that's really a multifaceted, I will say, types of policies and initiatives fostering entrepreneurship. On skill, of course, you may have heard about EU policies such as the European Years of Skills, and we discuss a lot about the development of skill at EU level, especially to give a boost to the entrepreneurial mindset and to equip the youth for the labor market. Here, of course, we do not only talk about the digital and the green. I think the skill is really wide. We may have discussed during previous YIPA event, I think, about the Entrep Camp that like sets the diversity of skills that could be needed all along the work life. Of course, the EU also is promoting social inclusion and innovation for the youth and the young entrepreneur. We discussed in previous sessions the EU Social Economy Action Plan, also the way we try to push the different member state strategy to support young entrepreneur in creating a business to have a positive social impact. I think this is very important. Among other things, in order to address unemployment and social exclusion. Well, I can mention also definitely one of the key component of our strategy remains the support we want to give to the youth on the digital and the green transition. We have a big focus to prepare the young generation to contribute and to benefit to the twin transition. In this context, of course, education and skill for innovative impact business practices is needed. Well, we encourage entrepreneurial mindset through university. You all know, I think, the Erasmus Plus scheme that some are dedicated to young entrepreneur. We try to do a lot, pushing to increase public awareness and promoting entrepreneurship as a desirable, I would say, and viable career. We push for student incubator. We have a lot. We push for access to finance also. So it's very diverse, and I think the key challenge is indeed to take into consideration the multifaceted element of policy promoting youth entrepreneurship and the heterogeneity we have among the youth in all our member states.
Wonderful. That leads us well into our second question, which is how do you approach identifying the key challenges? So Baptiste just talked about all of these different objectives of trying to use policy to help with access to finance or skills through the Entrecomp framework. But maybe just quickly back to Baptiste before moving to Natalie again. How did the European Union identify these challenges? Was there a specific methodology used?
No, I don't think there is specific methodology. If I go back to what my director mentioned in an introduction, and it's a global element, irrespective of the policy, is that you need to define and set really well the objective you have.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know the population you want to work with, and promoting youth entrepreneurship and pushing for a well-oriented policy. I mean, it goes from need people to people doing their master, in business in university, and this is a complete different targets you want to have. So of course. So the notion of data, accessing to data, having your survey is the ultimate key. So we do have our flash Eurobarometers. You may have heard about the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. Well, something we do once every 2 years with the OECD. It's a missing entrepreneur. So we have certain numbers of instruments to identify the barriers on the type of elements you want to tackle, the skill, access to finance, the network, etc. This consideration we already mentioned. The second element, and I think this is why we have the YIPA today, is the key challenge is to have a bottom-up setting of the youth policy, and here having meaningful stakeholder consultation and reaching the people that you want to reach through the different networks or networks of networks or federation of networks is an absolute necessity. And it's far from being easy. And I do hope that, like, after these 6 seminars and the final event we will have in Brussels in October, as a legacy, we'll find a way to make sure the different, youth entrepreneur network within Europe will manage to create an alliance and federate around something, that can continue beyond this academy we launched. Another element, and I'm really keen into that because being a policy officer for almost 2 decades, is to have a meaningful evaluation of the program. There is no well-settled policy if you don't use the lesson learned. And an evaluation of a policy is something that needs to be used, to be known, and to be widespread among practitioners. It's not something you do because you have to tick the box and then to put on your shelf. Maybe to and this takes time. It means that, like, in your policy cycle management system, you need to anticipate and to recognize the time it takes to engage, to define your policy, to know your people, to have your data, to use your lesson learned in order to move on. And obviously, one of the key elements as a policy officer we never have is time. Maybe just to finish with 2 other points, research is important. Within the EU, we have this major users in Europe really trying to match academy, university, research center together with policymakers. And this is something that need to be more spread. I remember people mentioning that often in university, because it's really research oriented, there is kind of a big gap between what is being teach at university and the real life, for young start-upper and young entrepreneur. And last but not least, and this is something that everyone is keen on working on, is to just switch our cultural mindset and addressing cultural attitude that may hinder entrepreneurship. The best of is the fear of making mistake and the failure. Okay, we all know that like a large majority of your first business end up with a failure, but this is how you learn. And trying to overcome this cultural mindset is for me the biggest challenge. But no doubt that like the young generation is doing much better than us and is no longer afraid of failure. Thank you.
Wonderful. You covered a lot of great avenues for identifying challenges. You mentioned monitoring and evaluation, which are very important in the policymaking process. Surveys like the Eurobarometer, which we discussed at the very beginning of YEPA, because it showed how young people want to start businesses, but also identified key challenges that they're facing in this process. So data, surveys, research, like you said, is very important. So these are all great sources of information to identify the gaps and challenges that young people are facing. So now I'll turn to Natalie. And in Malta, how is the process for identifying the key challenges?
So, as I have already said, I mean, our partnerships with private and public entities is very, very important. So that is from where we get feedback on a very regular basis. And then we are also participating in key national events, again, either organized by the private sector or by other public entities. Ourselves as Malta Enterprise, we have also come up with a concept which targets youth entrepreneurship. So I would say around 7-8 years ago, we have started with the concept of the Startup Cafe, which used to bring around a number of youth entrepreneurs who were still at a point where they were trying to understand what can be done under this umbrella of entrepreneurship and what services can be offered, and that proved to be a very important source of information in the sense that it provided an informal environment where one could discuss and understand what is happening and what needs to be changed. And then that event in itself evolved into something bigger in the sense that for the past 4 years, and now we are in the fifth year, as Malta Enterprise, we organize a startup festival, and part of the startup festival is directly focused on youth entrepreneurship. So there we offer a focused program to youth aged from, I would say, 14 or 15 years of age and over. And that event has two primary aims. One, again, to discuss youth entrepreneurship and available support. And personally, I would say the second aim is the most important, is to create a fora where youth know that every year there will be this event and they can share their experiences, opportunities, and understand a bit more of where we can go and what we can do in terms of policy improvement and collaboration with education institutions, which, in my opinion, are crucial when it comes to pushing the agenda of youth entrepreneurship.
Wonderful. Yes, so both of you are talking about the importance of engaging with other stakeholders. So whether that's support organizations, other public agencies working on youth entrepreneurship, or networks and experts. So bringing in people that are on the ground and have maybe a different perspective to make sure that policy and the programs are addressing the needs that young people are actually experiencing. And then I really liked that this event offers a forum for young people to directly interact with policymakers. It's always a great opportunity. That's what we've tried to do through YEPA as well, to get young people to share their experiences and help inform policymakers of how the policy is actually being perceived and used. So that's a great initiative. Well, turning now a bit more to how maybe policy can be tailored or adapted to young people. So there's very different approaches to designing policy. There's more general approaches, and then we can get very specific for very niche types of youth entrepreneurship. Perhaps, Natalie, you could talk about how Malta Enterprise tailors their policy, or perhaps they don't. Perhaps it's just a general approach, and then young people are integrating into those types of programs. So for instance, are there any type of modifications to the policies, whether it's for maybe young people who do not have a degree or young people in higher education or rural versus urban? Is there any type of tailoring to the policies?
So currently, the incentives that we offer as Malta Enterprise are generic in the sense that, for example, they would focus on startups which do not necessarily need to be youths behind that particular startup. However, having said that, we do have a number of schemes which support the upskilling of young people. Because obviously today, even if you have been working for a number of years, upskilling, it's something that needs to be happening day in, day out. So we do have a number of incentives which support the upskilling of youth. We also work very closely with both the University of Malta and our vocational college, which is the Malta College for Science, Arts and Technology, to again create opportunities for young people to come together and understand what is entrepreneurship. Now, we believe that you can understand what is entrepreneurship academically, but one can also understand what is entrepreneurship by experiencing in doing, and that can mean having an internship with private companies in certain areas. And the third point is to create an environment where if someone wants to set up their own company or setup, they will receive the support in doing so. Currently, we are also working on a particular framework, which will focus on startups. And we are also looking at the opportunity whether this will also be tackling youth entrepreneurship. I am mentioning this because, again, this framework will in itself provide the necessary tools to different government entities which are doing a lot of work in this area to have a framework within which to operate. We understand that young people may have issues to operate within certain existing policies. So we are reaching out to the local community to understand what needs to be changed and whether there is current policies which do not exist, and they feel that by bringing these policies into being, it will create a better environment to work in.
Wonderful, thank you. Baptiste, I know you've already mentioned how the European Commission and European Union are working to make entrepreneurship in many aspects of the labor market more inclusive. Do you want to add any extra points on how policy can do this?
I think it's connecting the politics, the policy, and the beneficiary has been always challenging. But with the youth and youth entrepreneurship, I think it's even more challenging. If I don't know, a few days ago, I think you may have heard we had this European youth event. I mean, the numbers of platforms we at the EU level develop, such as the European News Portal, everything linked to the European entrepreneur network. If you just like Google it, you will see between the Young Entrepreneur Organization of the European Commission, link, I mean, all the group linked to the Erasmus for Youth Entrepreneur, of course, and all the LinkedIn, I don't know, just to mention it, the European Confederation for Young Entrepreneurs, of course, all the YIPA members here representing their own network. So we really try to gather the diversity of the young population in the context of our policy shaping. And when I say the diversity, we're talking also about young migrants, about young people with some disability, with people who didn't have the chance to finalize their secondary education. We talk about the young woman, try to take into consideration all the young population with vulnerabilities. But this is, by far, I think, the most challenging element, because we even have, I mean, this is a classic one, have the Have You Say portal, where every citizen, every time we launch a new initiative, can say something. But having an inclusive participatory approach when you set your policy is a challenge, and making sure you find relevant and effective measures, such as having a regular feedback mechanism. That's something that is really important. What works, what doesn't work, and to which extent you have the right metrics on targets to make sure that what you're doing is effective. That's the purpose of any policy, is to be able to be monitors, and understanding the need and the characteristic of the people you want to work with, to make sure you tailor something that will be effective and efficient, is our primary concern. And I mean, it's the key challenge of every policy makers. But I do hope that the discussion we have today and the discussion we had previously will lead towards this, at least from a network perspective, something will be lively and will be able for all the youth entrepreneur organization, network, federation, confederation, to be vocal enough at the entire cycle of the policy to make sure that, both from the identification of the policy up to the moment it's evaluated, they have their way to say and to share their views. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I'll pass the floor back to Natalie for the last question that Baptiste somewhat integrated, but it's very accurate, because monitoring and evaluation really goes hand in hand with designing the policy as well as delivering it and then eventually evaluating it. So how has Malta approached monitoring and evaluation of youth entrepreneurship policies? Is this an ad hoc process? Is this a regular activity?
No, so from our end, it has become a regular activity to understand whether the assistance that we are providing as Malta Enterprise is offering the value that we are after. So when young entrepreneurs would come to Malta Enterprise to apply for certain funding, there would be certain criteria that they would need to commit to. Obviously, we do understand that there would be changes from what they have initially started with to where they end, but in the process, we make sure that the projects are being monitored. And are being monitored, as you have mentioned, either because from the monitoring, it would be clear that we need to make updates or changes to existing policies and support measures, and also to offer support to that particular young entrepreneur to understand what changes needs to happen. In the case of Malta, being small has a really good advantage in the sense that we offer personalized services to our young entrepreneurs who are clients to Malta Enterprise. So day in, day out, they can reach to the relationship manager to discuss where their projects are in terms of implementations, changes, and whether they come across anything which they feel needs to be updated from our side or from any other government entity. So yes, I totally agree that evaluation and monitoring of any policies and assistance that is available to young entrepreneurs is crucial to continue growing and making sure that we are creating the right ecosystem.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. We now have time for a few questions from the audience for our panelists. So feel free to raise your hand or write in the chat. I think there was already a question in the chat. Yes, Leonie, go. I see your hand now. I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Sometimes it's like COVID never happened, right? Sorry. Yeah, so my question is in the chat, but to facilitate matters, I thought I would also read it out. So, Natalie, I was interested in the framework that you said is being developed. Would it be possible to share any more information, or is that still under wraps?
No, I mean, the idea is that it will be launched in the coming months. There was a consultation with different stakeholders on the framework, and as I have said, it will be primarily focused on startups, so entrepreneurship there, and possibly extend that to other areas within the startups and entrepreneurship ecosystem.
Thank you. I would be happy to be involved in the consultation, so please keep me in the loop. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments, reflections, questions for the panelists? Give someone a moment. Yes, please, Elena.
Hello, I'm Elena. I come from Youth Proactive, an NGO, and I wanted to ask you because you're from the institutional level. So I wanted to ask you which are the factors or like the measures you identify after doing this follow-up of the policies that contribute to the young people to start an enterprise. So like what are the incentives that you identify that work best? For example, in terms of taxation or giving yesterday we talked that in France they are giving a special status to the students that want to start an enterprise. So I don't know if Malta, are you doing something like this, or I wanted to ask you this.
So currently we don't have that type of measure that you have referred to, but I would say at a very general level, youth entrepreneurs are after two things: speed and clarity. So we have to make sure that the public entities that are offering support are really kind of fast in the timing in which they reply to queries, reply to requests for support, so on and so forth, and clarity in the message. When we're saying clarity in the message, we mean that there is so much out there, but we have to make sure that the way it's packaged and the way it's reaching out youth entrepreneurship, it's clear enough so they know where to stand. Obviously, when it comes to entrepreneurship in general, and not just to youth entrepreneurship, is to make everyone understand that public support has some sort of capping. So even though we will be there to offer support, mentoring, so on and so forth, there is always that gap between moving from being totally dependent on public support to getting funds and getting support from private industry. So I think even at a European level, that is something that we really need to work on.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, I think we can go to our break. So it's about 11:20, so we can come back at 11:30, enough time to stretch our legs and maybe get a cup of coffee. So we'll see you back here in 10 minutes at 11:30.
Thank you.
Thank you again for Natalie and Baptiste. It was a wonderful session.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the networking time with other YEPA participants. I think everyone's made it back to the main room. Wonderful. Well, Without further ado, we'll get started with our session 2, which will investigate more the key success factors and different considerations to think about while designing and delivering youth entrepreneurship support. So I have the pleasure of introducing Leonie, who is an associate professor at the University of Malta, who will give us a presentation on how to design youth entrepreneurship policies and programs. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Helen, and thank you to the OECD for inviting me to share some of my views with you on this important topic. I will try to share my screen. Can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Okay, so as you can see on my cover slide, I'm from the Edward de Bono Institute for Creative Thinking and Innovation, and the subject areas that we cover are at the bottom of the slide. So we do creativity, we do innovation management, entrepreneurship, future studies, and critical thinking. My main areas of research and teaching are entrepreneurship, which is why I'm here, and creativity, mainly from a psychological perspective. But over the years, I've also been involved with the OECD in their inclusive entrepreneurship policy development efforts, including the Missing Entrepreneurs, which you are probably all familiar with. I've done also some broader work on developing case studies and a background paper on inclusive entrepreneurship more broadly. And I'm also very pleased to be part of the YEPA group. And in today's brief presentation, I thought I would share some insights and recommendations. So insights that I have gathered through my work, both from my academic research, but also my work for the OECD, focusing on youth entrepreneurship policies and programs, and also some recommendations that I think might help us move towards ultimately our shared vision and goals of making entrepreneurship more inclusive, more attainable for everyone, including in this case, youths. So the first insight that I would like to share is actually a really good insight for the purpose of today's discussion, because it is that youths and women, but that's a different underrepresented group, but youths do actually seem to be the best served of all the underrepresented groups targeted by the OECD for inclusive entrepreneurship policies and programs. So there is an ever-growing number of opportunities designed to inspire and also attract and support young people to take up entrepreneurship. Natalie from Malta Enterprise earlier mentioned the Startup Festival, which is a really great initiative that I have also been involved in for a few years, and also its predecessor, the Startup Cafe. A number of other initiatives for youths are available in Malta. For example, we have the Julian's Tech Startup Challenge, which is a sort of a retreat for young students who are interested in science and technology, but they also are introduced to innovation and entrepreneurship aspects. We have the Foundation for the Promotion of Entrepreneurial Initiatives, which includes a Future Founders Club, and this is a dedicated club for students who are aspiring to be entrepreneurs, and a number of other incubators and co-working spaces and whatnot. Not to mention the startup or business plan competitions, such as the JA Malta Startup competition and the company program, which are also quite popular and very valuable in terms of developing the entrepreneurial mindset and entrepreneurship skills of young people. And this might be having positive effects, at least at the European level, because according to the OECD's Missing Entrepreneurs report, the number of self-employed youths in the UK has risen in the past few years. However, in my observations, at least, now I don't have hard data here, but from my observations, at least in Malta, and Malta's, as you all know, a very small country, and since I have been working in this area for many years now, I tend to be involved in practically, well, if not all, in most of the entrepreneurship related initiatives, especially for young people, since I'm at the university also. Unfortunately, my observation is that the take-up for these programs has been dwindling in some shape or form. No, maybe the actual number of students who are taking on these programs hasn't decreased per se, but because there is an increasing number of these programs, there seems to be some sort of perhaps cannibalization, we can say, right? So we can take it that maybe the fact that there are so many different options, students nowadays are spoiled for choice in a way, right? And well, they're not going to take up all the entrepreneurship training programs, so they have to be selective. Another possible reason might be that, as Natalie mentioned before, maybe they don't even know where to start or which to choose. Right. So now, just to be clear, I am not saying that we should do less. It's great that we are doing so much, but maybe it is time to better understand what today's young people are really interested in, what their needs are, what their motivations are in terms of entrepreneurship. What is really making them tick. And here I feel that sometimes there might be a bit of a generation gap. And I saw this on social media the other day, and it made me laugh, so I thought I'd share it here as well. But this comment really exemplifies the fact that in many cases, policymakers traditionally, and also educators, researchers, case in point, there is a generation gap between us and the young people who we are trying to educate, who we are trying to train, who we are trying to inspire, who we are trying to develop policies for. But we need to find a way of bridging this gap. The young people of today are not the same as they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Their interests have changed, their opportunities have changed, technologies have changed, right? So I think it's really important that we, as Jason said before, and I think another speaker also mentioned, I was trying to take down notes on who was saying what. It's important that young people are given a place at the table, that we listen to their interests, and that they are actually involved in the development of the policy programs and whatnot. And hopefully, once we understand that, we can try to streamline the youth entrepreneurship support initiatives and programs in order to minimize duplication, inefficiencies, and mismatches. Okay, and to try to make programs more relevant and more attractive for young people. My second insight is also, well, it was also mentioned by my colleague earlier, Jason from Malta, and that is that youths are a vastly heterogeneous group. And also, we need to consider that many young people form part of other underrepresented groups. So we can have young women, we can have young people with disabilities, we can have young immigrants, or they can even form part of 3 or more groups. So we can have a young woman who is a migrant, or a young woman who has a disability, right? However, for practical reasons, of course, many policies and programs are generic or a one-size-fits-all, because it is very difficult to design policies and programs that are so fine-grained, so tailored, to really then drill down into the specific needs of all these different minorities, so to speak. Okay, so this is, I think, another challenge that we need to face. Still, I think it is worth considering what additional challenges such young people face by these compounding factors, okay, or especially forming part of different underrepresented groups. And again, I repeat, as already been said, it's really important that we give young people a voice, we listen to them, we can learn so much from them. I learn so much from my students and my everyday interactions with them, not just from my systematic research, right? But I think it is really important that we listen to them. Also, in terms of more practical recommendations, perhaps we can say that we can adopt what is called a funnel approach, in the sense that we start off by creating policies and programs that are more generic, that are more affordable also from a policy perspective to offer to implement in order to try to attract as many people as possible from the different groups. Then this would include a basic component sort of thing to various cohorts. Then there can be more tailored interventions and more tailored support, including packaging of support of training with other types of policy instruments to those who show an acquisition of skill and also an interest towards self-employment and entrepreneurship. Okay, so starting broad and then tailoring down. So rather than trying to tailor for everyone almost a priori or blindly, really understanding how and in what ways tailoring needs to be done. My last insight is also great news that policy and programs in general have indeed come a very long way from how they were in the past. In the past, they were focused very much on the hard business skills and the hard, the business-oriented instruments, funds, and that sort of thing. But nowadays, we are seeing a lot more in terms of soft skills, transversal skills, like, for example, the 21st century skills. I'm always very pleased to see the integration of creativity, for example, for obvious reasons, in entrepreneurship training programs and in entrepreneurship policies. But unfortunately, I think that there are still some gaps, including in almost the absence, I would say, of acknowledging personal, psychological, and physical well-being of young people in entrepreneurship policies and programs. Even though research has shown that well-being is a challenge for young people. So there is a lot of research that shows that entrepreneurship is a stressful endeavor, there is high risk of failure, there is, a lot of hard work involved, sometimes it can be a lonely journey. So that in itself can be a trigger of poor psychological well-being, right? And of course, well-being is important to young people. We see nowadays that I don't know, whereas my generation, perhaps, we used to work till we drop if we have a goal, a deadline. Maybe as an overgeneralization, but I do see that young people have become a little bit more laid back and, they take more care of themselves in terms of, okay, but I'm not going to work too hard because it's going to have negative repercussions. However, from my research, I have found that unfortunately, younger entrepreneurs tend to be less or tend to adopt less effective coping strategies that are then associated with poorer psychological well-being than older entrepreneurs. So older entrepreneurs kind of seem to have learned how to cope with business-related stressors a little bit more than the younger entrepreneurs, which makes sense. But I think it's an important insight that we need to look into. I also found that students were unfortunately less hopeful than other adults. This was a survey that we carried out during the pandemic. So we also saw that young people here are apparently more stressed out. And in another study, I found that when I was looking then into the personality traits, I looked into light triad personality traits and the dark triad personality traits, which, as the name imply, the light triad are more benevolent and the dark triad are malevolent. I actually found that the light triad entrepreneurs have better coping skills and better well-being outcomes. So my final set of recommendations are that actually policies and programs, I think nowadays, need to start to acknowledge more and more the importance of well-being and to start to include well-being measures and values. And by values here, I think we also need to keep reminding students, so perhaps they don't need so much reminding on the first one, that in a world that seems to glorify busyness, it's important to take some time out and balance our well-being, our well-being and our striving. And lastly, that in a world that seems very competitive and cutthroat, it actually pays to be kind and compassionate, both to oneself and to others. And on this note, I thank you very much for listening, and I will be very happy to answer questions or discuss what I have been overviewing.
Many thanks, Leonie, for a very interesting presentation that introduces some new elements that we haven't yet discussed, like the well-being measures. Uh, it's a very important topic that's becoming discussed more and more, as you said. So are there any questions for Leonie on anything or comments? You don't necessarily have to have a question. Feel free to raise your virtual hand or unmute yourself to ask the question.
Some of what I said was actually repeating or reinforcing what some of my other colleagues from Malta, for example, were saying in their previous slots.
Mm.
But Helen, as you pointed out, I think the well-being aspect is really something that needs to be explored more broadly. But also, Malta Enterprise has been looking into the well-being aspect, not specifically of youth entrepreneurs, but of entrepreneurs more broadly. There have been a number of initiatives. I was recently invited to speak at a well-being in entrepreneurship event on the sister island of Gozo, which regretfully I couldn't attend because we were running a training program for an entrepreneurship training program for people with disabilities, which again I mentioned Malta Enterprise was financially supported by Malta Enterprise. And kind of this is where my comment about the young people actually often form part of multiple underrepresented groups, so we really need to understand how these compounding factors then are going to affect their intentions and actually then their actions and success possibilities.
Yes, Toby.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. It's again very interesting presentation. One question, or to just come back on one of the things you mentioned, which was that youth are well represented in the policies approaches, a group which is targeted a lot by policies. I think that was one of the things you said at the beginning. Um, we're still here talking about the barriers and challenges of youth entrepreneurship, but so. From your perspective, then what's not working? If they're being targeted, but the barriers still persist, what perhaps are we missing? And is it, of course, we talk about youth being all different. Is it then uh, really youth which is the barrier, or is it these other characteristics, factors which are perhaps more of a challenge? I'm just curious to hear your perspective.
I think my perspective, as I was saying, it's a combination of different factors. So maybe what we have done so far is that we have made entrepreneurship a lot more accessible to youths in general, right? But now that we have got there, we need to understand how to go to the next level of seeing who is underrepresented among the youths in this case, because the heterogeneity aspect doesn't only apply, of course, to youths, but it also applies to the other underrepresented groups, like people with disabilities, for example. Right? We're offering now training for people with disabilities, but there are so many different disabilities. There are the physical, there are the intellectual, and some are a lot more challenging for the individual and also for society to deal with than others. Same with seniors. I have a PhD student who's finalizing his dissertation on senior entrepreneurs. And we see that senior entrepreneurs are being more and more attracted towards entrepreneurship. But even that is a hugely heterogeneous group. We have seniors who have many years of managerial experience and education and whatnot. And we have seniors who have been either unemployed for a large portion of their lives. Yeah. So I think now it is really time to start to look at the underrepresented or underrepresented groups among now the main groups.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question on your funnel idea. It was a really interesting image. I liked the funnel concept, but I want to clarify when you're saying that the entrepreneurship training shouldn't necessarily be packaged with other supports at the outset. So what are you proposing as like the baseline? Is that integrating entrepreneurship education into schools, or can you explain a little bit more what is the top of the funnel?
Okay, yes, the top of the funnel is to have basic entrepreneurship training available across the board from as young an age as possible.
Mm, okay.
Ideally, yes, from primary, but starting it as a more of an entrepreneurial mindset sort of training rather than, the narrow business skills per se.
Okay, so more of like the leadership and innovation, creative thinking. Is that
Yeah,
what you
I mean,
mean?
there's the Entrecomp framework, which packages it, I think,
Mhm.
quite nicely, but then developing activities maybe actually integrated into the curriculum that are appropriate, age appropriate. Okay, so growing up already from a young age with this mindset that being entrepreneurial in a variety of settings is beneficial, and entrepreneurship in the narrow sense of the word is a career option for when we are older. Now, obviously, not everybody is going to choose that route, and that's perfectly fine. But for those who do opt for that route, then the training becomes more tailored. Also, the packaging of training with other support measures can start to take place then later on in the process, so that they are also more targeted and hopefully more effective.
Mm. Thank you. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yes.
Wonderful. Are there any other questions for Leonie before we move on? Doesn't look like it. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you again, Leonie, for your presentation. It's very
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thanks.
I will now turn to the YEPA legacy. So we have in this next part, I will briefly present what the OECD and the European Commission are thinking in terms of the YEPA legacy and what this concrete document will entail. And then we want to hear it from you. So we'll have another breakout session and we'll talk about the different insights or the key takeaway messages that you have from YEPA that you want to see carried forward uh, in this process of building the YEPA legacy. So without further ado, share my screen. Okay. Hopefully you can see that now. Perfect. Okay, so as I mentioned, we are in the process of developing a YEPA legacy document. So we're aiming with this document to highlight the importance of a renewed policy approach for youth entrepreneurship. So going back to the roots of what YEPA was created and stood for over the last 2.5 years. We also want this document to capture the key insights and learnings that have taken place across all of the different events. So our online workshop series, our in-person events, our country side events, and try to consolidate them in one place since we've covered so many different topics like access to finance, social entrepreneurship, role models, networks, and bringing these all together. And we also want this document to serve as a tool for the continuity, advocacy, and future action that can be then taken back to your countries and used to help advocate for changes to policy by providing actionable policy pointers in a range of topics. So the idea is that this YEPA legacy document will be a short action-oriented report that covers the key issues that we've uh, explored over the last few years. And each of these issues will then have different policy pointers, similarly to what we've had in our summary notes of some of the key takeaways, but we want to work through those more and actually come up with concrete actions. So the idea behind the document is we want to stay with the spirit of YEPA, which is policy dialogue, consulting with others, and encouraging the whole community to come together to share their voices. So we want to hear from you throughout this process. So that will begin in a moment when we have our first discussions on YEPA insights, but it will also continue throughout. So we are looking to create a steering group that will help to guide the drafting of the document, notably on the priority messages. And I'll get into more specifics on what we're looking for in terms of people to participate in the steering group in just a moment. But regardless if you participate or not in the steering group, the draft document will be shared with all YEPA participants ahead of our in-person event in Brussels in October. So you will have time to share your feedback, your comments, any questions that you may have with us throughout this process over the next few months. And then in terms of the OECD, we'll be reviewing all of the materials and all of the different outputs. So all of the presentations that you have provided, the panel discussions, and different documents. We've kept them all, and we will make sure that we have different inputs from all of them included. In terms of the steering group, if you're interested in joining us, we're looking for a select group of people. So we're aiming to have a group of about 12 to 15 participants, which will be quite hard to narrow down from the overall YEPA group. But we're hoping that it's from a wide array of countries, and we want to represent all of the different YEPA profiles. So we have the policymakers, the networks, the experts, practitioners, young entrepreneurs themselves, as well as other support organizations. It's important that all of the different voices throughout YEPA are represented, and we want to make sure that they're balanced, that not everyone in the steering group is from the same country. Because that's what we've been trying to create with YEPA is this cross-cultural and country exchange. Another thing that we're looking for is that with the summer holidays, we would love for all of the steering group members to be available for an online meeting on the 17th July. It is a mandatory meeting as a steering group participant. And of course, we're looking for people who want to make this legacy meaningful and useful going forward to continue the work that we've been doing in YEPA over the last few years. So as a final note, if you're interested in joining, please send me an email by 30 June, and then we will get back to you on whether or not you've been selected for the steering group. So I will just pause here while there's still information up on the screen for any questions that you may have before I explain the next part of the discussion. Any questions on the document or any specifics on the steering group? Everything is clear, looks like. Wonderful. Okay, well then we will move on to the next part of, oh, well, there we go. So the next part is a breakout discussion. Like I mentioned, we want to jump right in and hear directly from you. So we're going to divide into really 2 to 3 small groups. And if we could have one person be the rapporteur who will then share with the larger group some of the key insights that were discussed so we can integrate these into the legacy document. So there are 3 primary questions we want to go over in the next few minutes. So reflecting on YEPA as a whole, what are the key takeaway messages for you? We have all of these different topics and different sub-themes that we've investigated, but what are the overarching messages that you have taken away from YEPA or that you would want to share with someone about YEPA? The second question is, how has your involvement in YEPA shaped your understanding of the challenges and opportunities faced by young entrepreneurs today and the role of policy in supporting them? So as we've talked about over the course of the YEPA, policy can be a lever for growth and also supporting young people and overcoming some of these barriers. So has this shaped your perspective? Is there anything new or different that you've learned, or has it mostly been things that you've already identified in your work in your home countries? And then the third question is, what are the broader lessons that you think should inform future youth entrepreneurship policies? Is there anything that we can take from YEPA and go forward with in terms of supporting new and innovative approaches to designing and delivering youth entrepreneurship policies? So without further ado, we'll go ahead and start the discussions. Wonderful. Well, we have the next few minutes to share about what we've discussed in our small breakout groups with each other. So I am the rapporteur for my group, so maybe I'll start off the conversation and then we can hear from the other group. And we're also quite a small group today, so if anything's been left out, feel free to jump into the conversation and add your thoughts. So in our group, we talked about how YEPA has been a really great source of peer learning and dialogue across countries, especially in identifying similar issues and how other countries have been working to address them. It's been a great source of inspiration to work with or to give new, fresh ideas on how policy can be used to support young people. One of the big takeaways and the key insights that our group discussed was the role of AI and how that's changing entrepreneurship and how young entrepreneurs are in some ways at the forefront of this as they're coming into business creation in this time, which will drastically change as one of our workshops explored last year. We also talked about the need to help young people consider uh, how their businesses fit within their communities. Are they addressing needs within their communities? Are they having a social impact? Are they green or considering environmental changes and how to help businesses not just strive for profit, but also have a purpose? So those were our big topics. And then some of our key take messages on actionable steps was helping to make sure that policy remains and continues to become more inclusive and is more flexible, allowing for young people to not be bogged down, or that policy itself is not a hurdle for young people as they start their entrepreneurial journeys. So that is a very brief summary of a great conversation that our small group had. But maybe I'll pass the floor now to someone else. What was some of the key takeaways from the other group's conversations?
Maybe on our group, I take a few notes. But yeah, it's I mean, discussing the legacy document. We should have a full session on this because the views are really diverse. Uh, we were lucky in our group because at least three participants had the opportunity to participate to all six YIPA seminars, and I think that something that came is that like we really had this opportunity to have this tour of EU on how multi-stakeholders approach youth entrepreneurship. And so today we had Malta, yesterday it was Croatia. Some people came back, with really good inspiration from Finland, and so yeah, this give a real inspiration to individually, but also to the network you represent through all the stories and projects that were shared. I think as a key takeaway also is that like we should not miss our target, and for many of the network, the target is a vulnerable young entrepreneur. Um, Also, what came is the relevance of the intersectionality and the way policy are thought and shaped different based on all the different concepts. Um, the relation between the youth topic in general, entrepreneurship, but also education, innovation, social economy. And so this really shows the complexity of this multifaceted policy. The cultural mindset, really good also with this academy because it was a unique way to know people and people with really different background and to discuss many topics that may not be our core topic, but that help us to see our core topic with another lens. All right. So now, indeed, the key question in terms of lesson learned is how we're going to consider a practical way to apply all the set of recommendation in the different papers or notes that are issued after each um, each seminar on how do we get the message across because if we don't, then we lose something. And this is the entire challenge of the legacy document. And so what's the next stage? To be sure that like everything that has been said and shared is from a tangible way well disseminated and used from a policy perspective, from a research perspective, from a network perspective, and of course for the young entrepreneur in Europe. So definitely the next step is to be practical and to come with a tangible output. So well, some people have made some suggestions to create a dedicated organization within the EU, to create European networks, and to make sure that everyone can submit ideas, to maybe have a more organized scheme, to come with a concrete element, with a new call of proposal. Well, lots of elements. I think one of the lessons I keep also in what has been said before stopping here and letting my colleagues in the group adding elements, is that finally there be some elements that were really present 2 years ago at the beginning of the academy that are still really present. Okay, and we talk here about the access to finance and the need to access to a different range and set of networks. So this is remaining a core element of what is needed to push for from a policy perspective. Thank you.
Yes, you brought up it. We also agreed that going back to workshop on access to finance definitely remains one of the core actions areas for youth entrepreneurship policy. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing those insights, Baptiste. Sounds like your conversation was quite engaging. So, unless anyone else wants to share, I think we can wrap up today's workshop just a few minutes early. So I just want to thank Katia and Leonie for speaking today, as well as Malta for co-hosting, but all of you for staying and participating in the last workshop. And congratulations for those who did all 6. Bravo, well done. We definitely appreciate your engagement and your continued contributions to YEPA. It's been wonderful over the last few years working with you, learning from you, hearing your insights, and seeing everyone's continued commitment to empower youth entrepreneurship and believing in the power of public policy. So thank you very much for your participation. A quick reminder that there is still time to register for the Youth Entrepreneurship Policy Summit if you haven't already. The link is on the YEPA Hub or in the invitation that you received, or you can also get in touch with me if there's been any issues. So please do that by the end of the week, and you will hear from us and the European Commission shortly on the next steps on planning your trip to Brussels. So we look forward to seeing you in Brussels once again, and thank you for your participation. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.